The vibration of my phone against the nightstand woke me up before the alarm did. It was exactly 6:01 a.m. I reached for it blindly, expecting a junk email or a calendar reminder for a client meeting. I squinted against the harsh blue light of the screen. It wasn't a text. It was a high-priority notification from my most secure banking app. My eyes adjusted, and I read the banner across the top of the screen. Oakhaven Trust, wire transfer confirmed, $2.5 million. I blinked, sure that I was still dreaming. I sat up in bed, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I unlocked the phone with trembling fingers and opened the app. There it was in black and white. A transfer initiated 4 hours ago. The destination was an LLC I had never heard of in my life. Elysian Innovations. My blood turned to ice. That wasn't just a savings account. That was the Oakhaven Generational Trust. It was the fund I had spent the last 15 years building, brick by brick, for my 2 children. It was their college tuition, their first homes, their safety net. It was supposed to be locked down tight, untouchable for another 10 years. Now the balance read 0. I stared at the screen, the silence of the bedroom deafening. $2.5 million. Gone. Just like that. I felt sick to my stomach, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I didn't scream. I didn't wake anyone. I just stared at the 0, my mind racing through 1,000 terrifying possibilities. I needed to breathe, but the air felt thin. I forced myself to focus. My name is Phelan. I'm 45 years old, a senior wealth manager, and a man who has built his entire reputation on long-term planning and ironclad security. I manage millions for other people. I know how protocols work. I know that money doesn't just vanish unless someone with very specific access makes it happen. I got out of bed and walked silently to my home office, closing the door softly behind me. I sat in my leather chair and booted up my desktop. I needed to see the full transaction log. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Part of me was praying this was a glitch, a banking error that I could fix with a frantic phone call. But deep down, I knew better. I logged into the back end of the trust account. The transfer was authorized at 2 a.m. The digital signature used to clear the wire wasn't a hacker's code. It was a manual authorization. Someone had physically signed a wire request form and uploaded it to the bank's secure portal. I stared at the screen, my meticulous life crumbling around the edges. I protect money for a living. I am the guy who tells clients to change their passwords every month. And yet, right here, under my own roof, someone had bypassed my security. The Elysian Innovations, LLC, didn't sound like a scammer's shell company. It sounded deliberate. It sounded personal. The door to my office creaked open. I quickly minimized the banking window, my heart skipping a beat. It was my wife, Morgan. She was wearing her silk robe, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She looked at me with a familiar expression of mild annoyance mixed with pity. "Are you working again, Phelan?" she sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "It's barely dawn. You're so boring. You have to live a little, you know." I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the last 6 months, Morgan had been distant. She called it finding herself. She had been volunteering as a consultant for a friend's startup, spending late nights out at strategy dinners. She constantly complained about our budget, calling my financial caution suffocating. "Just checking the markets," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. It was flat, devoid of the panic raging inside me. "Well, hurry up," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I have a big day today. That launch party for the startup is tonight. You're still coming, right? It would be nice for you to support something exciting for once." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. She rolled her eyes playfully and walked away. She called our life boring. She called my safety net suffocating. As her footsteps faded down the hall, I brought the banking window back up. The $2.5 million wasn't just missing. It had been moved to fund the very excitement she was always chasing. I waited until I heard the shower running in the master bathroom before I made my next move. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I opened a new tab and typed Elysian Innovations LLC into a corporate search database I used for work. The results populated instantly. It was a registered entity, barely 6 months old. The business address was a rented co-working space downtown. I scrolled down to the filing documents. There, listed as founder and CEO, was a name I recognized, Idris K. I sat back, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. Idris. I had met him once, briefly. Morgan had introduced him as a visionary genius she was helping. He was younger than me, flashy, The kind of guy who used buzzwords he didn't understand and wore expensive watches he likely leased. So, this was the friend. The pieces started to click together, forming a picture that made me want to vomit. Morgan wasn't just consulting. She was investing. But she didn't have $2.5 million of her own money to invest. She had access to our shared checking, but that rarely held more than 10 grand. To get $2.5 million, she would have needed to access the Oakhaven Trust. But that required my signature. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking next to Idris's name. She was funding her boyfriend's failing dream with my children's reality. I needed concrete proof. Circumstantial evidence wasn't enough for what I was about to do. I needed to see the communication. I looked around the office. Morgan's iPad was sitting on the love seat where she'd left it the night before. We shared an Apple ID for convenience, a decision she had insisted on years ago. She probably thought she was safe because she deleted her texts on her phone. But Morgan wasn't technical. She didn't understand that devices synced. I picked up the tablet and unlocked it with the passcode, our anniversary. I went straight to the Messages app. It was empty, clean, but I knew where to look. I tapped on the edit button in the top corner and selected Show Recently Deleted. A list of hundreds of messages flooded the screen. My stomach turned as I began to scroll. They were all there. Every conversation between Morgan and Idris for the past 30 days. He'll never notice, Idris. One read from 3 days ago. The boring money is just sitting there doing nothing. We need it by Friday, baby, Idris had replied. Or the launch is dead. It's our future, she wrote back. I'm doing it tonight. Then, I found the smoking gun. A photo sent at 2:05 a.m. It was a picture of the wire transfer form. At the bottom was my signature. But underneath the photo she had typed, "He's so sloppy he left his signature stamp unlocked in his desk." It was easy. She didn't just steal. She forged. And she was proud of it. I stared at the photo on the tablet, zooming in until the pixels blurred. That was my physical signature stamp. I kept it in the bottom drawer of my desk, inside a locked metal box. It was only for emergency documents when my hand cramped from signing hundreds of pages. I put the tablet down and walked over to my desk. I pulled on the handle of the bottom drawer. It was locked. I felt under the lip of the desk where I kept the spare key taped, a hiding spot only someone living in this house would know. She had come in here, likely while I was asleep or in the shower, found the key, unlocked the box, and stamped the wire transfer form. Then she locked everything back up as if nothing had happened. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated heist. The text message she sent to Idris echoed in my head. He's so sloppy. I wasn't sloppy. I was trusting. I trusted the woman I vowed to share my life with. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. The heartbreak had burned away the moment I saw that zero balance. Now all that was left was cold, hard clarity. She had treated our children's future like a piggy bank for her lover. She thought she had pulled off the perfect crime because she thought I was weak. The anger inside me settled into a quiet, dangerous focus. Morgan thought she was the smart one, the exciting one. She thought I was just the boring husband who pushed papers. But she forgot that those papers are ironclad legal contracts. I turned to my wall safe and punched in the code. The heavy door swung open with a hiss. I pulled out the thick, leather-bound binder labeled Oakhaven Generational Trust. I didn't need to read the whole thing, I wrote it. But I flipped to page 12, paragraph 4, just to satisfy my own rage. The administrator shall have sole, non-revocable authority over all disbursements. No other trustee, guardian, or beneficiary may authorize withdrawals without the administrator's direct, notarized consent. I was the administrator. Not Morgan. Not us jointly. Just me. Morgan had forged my signature, yes. But in her arrogance, she had ignored the proper verification channels. She assumed the bank would just process it because it was a family account. She didn't realize that by forging that signature on a trust document, she hadn't just broken a bank rule. She had committed wire fraud. And because I was the sole administrator, her signature, even a good forgery, was legally void. She had built her entire plan on a foundation of sand. And I was about to bring the tide in. It was 6:55 a.m. The world was waking up, but I was already at war. I sat at my desk, adjusted my webcam, and logged into the bank's ultra-secure portal. I requested an immediate emergency video conference with the fraud department. Because of the assets I managed, I had a dedicated line. At 7 a.m. sharp, a face appeared on my screen. A woman named Agent Ross from the High Net Worth Fraud Division. Good morning, Mr. Phelan. We received your priority alert. How can I assist? Good morning, Agent Ross, I said, my voice steady and professional. I am reporting a fraudulent, unauthorized wire transfer of $2.5 million from the Oakhaven Trust. The transaction was initiated via a forged signature. Her eyes widened slightly. A forgery, sir? Yes. I have already uploaded the evidence to your secure server, I continued. You will find a digital copy of the forged document, alongside timestamped screenshots of text messages between the perpetrators admitting to the theft and the method of forgery. I didn't say my wife. I said perpetrators. In this moment, she wasn't my wife. She was a liability. I am the sole administrator of this trust, I stated. I did not authorize this. I am initiating a formal clawback of these funds immediately. The receiving entity is Elysian Innovations. Agent Ross typed furiously on her end. I see the documents, Mr. Phelan. The evidence is very substantial. We can initiate a provisional clawback immediately due to the fraud indicators. We will contact the receiving bank to freeze the funds on their end. Do it, I said. But I'm not done. I took a sip of cold water. As the primary account holder on my personal joint accounts, I am invoking the financial security clause. I have reason to believe my personal accounts are also compromised by the same parties. Which accounts, sir? All of them, I said, my voice dropping an octave. The joint checking, the savings, the credit lines. Freeze everything. I want a total lockdown. No money moves out of any account bearing my name, or my wife's name, without my verbal confirmation code. This will decline all active cards, sir, including your wife's. I am aware, I said. That is the point. She is a compromised party. I cannot risk further theft. Cut the access. Now. I watched as she clicked the final buttons. It's done, Mr. Phelan. The accounts are locked. The clawback request has been sent to the receiving bank with a fraud flag. It might take a few hours for the other bank to process, but the money is effectively tagged. Thank you, I said and ended the call. I had just nuked our entire financial life, and the house was still quiet. I walked downstairs to the kitchen and started a fresh pot of coffee. I needed to act normal. The trap was set, but I needed Morgan to walk into it willingly. 10 minutes later, I heard her heels clicking on the hardwood. She swept into the kitchen, a whirlwind of perfume and excitement. She was wearing a new dress, a designer piece that I knew cost at least $2,000. Big day feelin', she chirped, grabbing an apple from the bowl. She did a little twirl. What do you think? It's for the launch tonight. I picked it up yesterday. I looked at the dress. She had bought it yesterday, likely using the credit card I had just frozen. It looks expensive, I said, leaning against the counter, nursing my mug. It's an investment, she scoffed, checking her reflection in the microwave door. You have to look the part to be the part. Idris says appearance is everything. She turned to me, her eyes bright with a manic sort of happiness. Idris's launch party is going to be huge. You should really come. See what real success looks like. It might inspire you. I took a slow sip of coffee, hiding the grim satisfaction curling on my lips. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. While I sat in my home office pretending to work, the bank's fraud team was moving with brutal efficiency. High-level banking isn't like walking into a local branch. When you allege a wire fraud involving a trust of such amount, the wheels turn fast and hard. My phone pinged with a secure update from Agent Ross. Clawback initiated. Receiving bank has been notified of fraudulent activity. A temporary freeze has been placed on all accounts associated with the recipient entity, Elysian Innovations. I leaned back in my chair, watching the notification. It was done. The money was no longer liquid. It was locked in a digital cage, inaccessible to Idris, Morgan, or anyone else pending the investigation. To get that money back, Idris would have to prove the transfer was legitimate. He would have to produce a contract signed by the administrator. Since I never signed anything, he couldn't do that. Even better, because the bank suspected fraud, they had likely frozen Idris's personal accounts too, just to be safe. That's standard protocol to prevent money laundering. I had essentially dropped a financial net over their entire operation. They were currently swimming in the trap, completely unaware that the water had just run dry. The clock was ticking down to 0, and they couldn't hear it. Downstairs, Morgan was in full event planner mode. I could hear her voice carrying up the stairs, giddy and high-pitched. She was pacing the living room, her phone pressed to her ear, oblivious to the financial nuclear winter I had just triggered. Yes, exactly, she laughed. We need the champagne fountain set up by 6. Don't worry about the cost, just make it look spectacular. I walked to the landing, listening. Payment? Oh sure, she said, waving a hand in the air as if shooing a fly. The wire cleared this morning. Just run the final invoice at the venue tonight. We'll settle everything then. The investors are very generous. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Hi. Yes, looking for the lighting crew. We need more blue. Electric blue. Money is no object today. She was digging a hole so deep she would never climb out of it. Every vendor she called, every promise she made, was based on money that was currently frozen by federal banking laws. She was running up a tab that was going to crash down on her head the moment the first card was swiped. She thought she was a queen building an empire. She was actually a squatter in a house of cards. I went back to my desk and opened a local tech news blog. I wanted to see how deep the delusion went. It didn't take long to find it. Idris's face was plastered on the front page. The headline read, Elysian Innovations secures massive $2.5 million seed round. I clicked the article. There was a photo of Idris, leaning against a brick wall, trying to look like the next Steve Jobs. He was wearing a black turtleneck and smirking at the camera. The quote below the picture made my jaw tighten. We've been working in stealth mode, Idris claimed in the article. But our vision attracted a secret angel investor who has total faith in us. This $2.5 million injection validates everything we've been building. Tonight, we celebrate the future. Secret angel investor. That was me. Or rather, that was my children's education. He was bragging about stolen money as if he had earned it through brilliance. He genuinely believed the money was his now. He didn't understand that the validation he was talking about was actually a felony wire fraud charge waiting to happen. He was celebrating a victory that I had already annulled. The launch party was held at a rented art gallery in the trendy part of the city. I arrived a little after 8 p.m. The street was lined with rented luxury cars. Music thumped from inside, heavy on the bass. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror. I looked calm, boring even, just the husband tagging along. I stepped out of my sedan and walked to the entrance. Inside, the gallery was packed. Waiters circulated with silver trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres. There were banners everywhere with the Elysian Innovations logo. In the center of the room, on a small stage, stood Morgan and Idris. They were holding champagne flutes, basking in the applause of a few dozen people, mostly local press and other wannabe entrepreneurs. Morgan looked radiant, her hand resting possessively on Idris's arm. Then she saw me. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. She gave a small, condescending smirk, raising her glass slightly in my direction. It was a look that said, I won. You're just a spectator in my new life. She whispered something to Idris, and they both laughed. They thought I was there to witness their triumph. I found a spot near a pillar, away from the crowd, and waited. The speeches ended, and the real party began. The atmosphere was electric with unearned success. A waiter approached the VIP table where Idris was holding court. He leaned down, whispering something discreetly in Idris's ear. It was the bill for the first round of premium bottle service. Idris didn't even look at the total. He laughed, still mid-conversation with a reporter, and casually pulled a sleek black corporate card from his jacket pocket. He handed it to the waiter with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Put it all on the company, Idris said loud enough for the table to hear. The waiter nodded and stepped back, inserting the card into his handheld chip reader. I watched the small machine. The light on top blinked yellow for a second. Then it turned a solid, angry red. The waiter frowned. He pulled the card out and wiped the chip on his apron, thinking it was a smudge. He inserted it again. Yellow. Then red. The waiter cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Sir? Idris turned around, annoyed at the interruption. What? I'm sorry, sir, the waiter said, his voice cutting through the nearby chatter. The card was declined. Declined? Idris laughed, but the sound was brittle. That's impossible. Try it again. It's probably your machine. The waiter tried again. The machine buzzed its rejection louder this time. Transaction denied. It's a glitch, Idris announced to the table, his smile tightening into a grimace. Bank security. They probably think someone stole the card because we're spending so much tonight. He chuckled, but nobody joined in. He reached for his wallet and pulled out his personal debit card. Use this one. I'll sort the corporate account out tomorrow. The waiter inserted the second card. The pause was agonizing. Then the red light flashed. Declined. Idris froze. His hand was shaking slightly as he took the card back. Before he could make another excuse, a man in a sharp suit, the catering manager, stepped into the VIP circle. He wasn't holding a tray, he was holding a tablet. "Mr. K," the manager said, his voice low but firm. "We just attempted to process the final payment for the venue and the staffing. The transaction failed. We tried the routing number for the check you provided earlier. That has also bounced." The air around the table seemed to vanish. The investors nearby stopped drinking. The glitch excuse wouldn't work for a bounced check. That meant insufficient funds. The illusion of the millionaire CEO was flickering out, right in front of the people he needed to impress the most. The DJ, sensing the tension or perhaps having been signaled by the unpaid staff, faded the music down. The sudden silence in the room was heavy. Heads turned toward the VIP section where Idris was arguing in hushed, frantic tones with the manager. Morgan, who had been across the room accepting compliments on the decor, saw the commotion. She realized something was wrong. Her smile dropped, and she hurried over, her heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. "What is going on?" she demanded, stepping between Idris and the manager. "Why are you harassing him?" "Payment, ma'am," the manager said, crossing his arms. "None of the cards are working." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Morgan huffed, rolling her eyes at Idris. "I told you to authorize the big spend limits." She opened her clutch and pulled out her personal platinum credit card, the one linked to our joint account. The one she used to buy the dress she was wearing. "Use this," she commanded, thrusting it at the manager. "Just fix it. We're trying to celebrate." The manager took the card. He didn't even need to insert it, he swiped it. The machine beeped instantly. "Declined, pickup card." "Declined, ma'am," the manager said, his voice flat. "It says contact issuer immediately. All your cards are coming up frozen." Morgan's face went white. That's not right. That's my husband's account. It has a $50,000 limit." Panic began to set in. Morgan snatched the card back, staring at it as if it had betrayed her. She pulled out her debit card, then her emergency card. She made the waiter try them all. "Declined. Declined. Declined." She looked around, wild-eyed. The investors were whispering. The press photographer had lowered his camera. The humiliation was total. Then, she scanned the room, looking for a scapegoat, looking for someone to blame for this technical error. Her eyes landed on me. I was standing by the pillar, calm, holding a glass of water. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't confused. And that enraged her. "Feelin'," she shrieked. The sound cut through the gallery. She stormed over to me, dragging a shell-shocked Idris by the sleeve. The crowd parted for them. She stopped inches from my face, her chest heaving. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Our cards aren't working. The accounts are broken. You need to call the bank right now and fix it before you ruin this night." She was so accustomed to me being the fixer, the safety net, that she genuinely thought she could demand my help. She thought this was an inconvenience I was obligated to solve. "Did you hear me?" she snapped, grabbing my lapel. "Fix the accounts." I gently removed her hand from my suit jacket. I smoothed the fabric, taking my time. The room was silent now. Everyone, the investors, the caterers, the friends, was watching. "They aren't broken, Morgan," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence, it carried to every corner of the room. "What?" she breathed. "The accounts," I repeated, looking her dead in the eye. "They aren't broken. They're frozen." I took a step back, widening the distance between us. I invoked the security clause on every joint asset we own about 12 hours ago. Your credit cards, your debit cards, your access to the savings. It's all gone. Morgan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Why would you?" "Because I know," I said. I shifted my gaze to Idris. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting to the exit. "I know about the Oakhaven Trust," I said. "I know about the $2,500,000 wire transfer. And I know about the forgery." The word forgery hung in the air like smoke. "The bank is currently freezing all accounts associated with the Oakhaven Trust fraud." I continued, my voice clinical and cold. "That includes the recipient account." I nodded toward Idris. "Elysian Innovations. Your accounts aren't just empty, Idris. They're under federal lock. It's called a clawback." What fraud?" Idris stammered. He tried to puff his chest out, but he looked like a child caught stealing candy. "That was a legal investment. We have the paperwork. Do you?" I asked. "Because the trust's sole administrator, that's me, didn't sign it." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. But the bank found the text messages you two exchanged very interesting. Specifically the ones where Morgan bragged about stealing my key to forge my stamp, and the ones where you discussed using my children's college fund to pay off your personal debts. Morgan gasped. She looked at Idris, then back at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just been caught, she had been documented. You read my texts? She whispered, horrified. I read the deleted ones, I corrected. And so did the fraud department. The room was deadly silent, but Idris tried to fight it. He laughed, a desperate, choking sound. This is insane, he announced to the crowd, spreading his arms wide. He's lying. He's just a jealous husband trying to sabotage a legitimate business deal. He turned to the investors who were slowly backing away. We have a contract. We have a signed wire transfer agreement. The funding is secured. Morgan grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my suit jacket. Phelan, stop it, she whispered furiously, her eyes darting around the room. You're making a scene. We can talk about the money at home. Just tell them it's a mistake so we can pay the caterers. She still didn't get it. She thought this was a domestic squabble. She thought she could charm her way out of a felony. It's not a mistake, Morgan, I said, shaking her off. And Idris, you keep talking about that contract. I looked at the investors, raising my voice slightly so the reporter in the back could hear. He claims he has a contract, but a contract signed by an unauthorized party isn't an investment. It's evidence. Idris froze. The sweat was running down his temples now. The Oakhaven Trust has one administrator, I said, stepping closer to him. Me. That is a legal designation. My signature is the only one that can authorize a wire transfer. I let that sink in. Since I didn't sign it, I continued, the document you uploaded to the bank is a forgery. And because you used the banking system to move stolen funds across state lines, it's not just theft. It's wire fraud. Idris's face went from pale to gray. He knew what that meant. It meant the FBI, not small claims court. The bank was very interested in the text messages where you coached my wife on how to steal the key to my desk, I added. They have already forwarded the file to federal authorities. That's why your accounts are frozen. You aren't a CEO anymore, Idris. You're a suspect. The implosion was instant. The angel investor's story had been exposed as a grand larceny scheme. The investors didn't ask for explanations, they just left. One by one, they set their champagne glasses down on the nearest tables and walked out the door without a word. The catering manager tapped his headset. Pack it up, he ordered his staff. We're leaving. Now. The music cut out abruptly. The harsh work lights were flipped on, killing the ambience. Waiters began stripping tablecloths, snatching half-eaten appetizers away. Morgan stood in the center of the room, looking like a ghost. Her grand launch party was dismantling itself around her. She looked at Idris for support, but he was already backing away, frantically trying to make a call on his cell phone. A call that I knew wouldn't connect because his service provider bill was likely on autopay from his frozen account. She was left standing alone in the wreckage of her own arrogance. I didn't stay to watch them beg. I turned my back on them and walked out to my car. I drove home in silence, the adrenaline fading into a deep, exhausted relief. The next morning, the bank confirmed the clawback was successful. The $2,500,000 was returned to the Oakhaven Trust, safe and sound. I filed for divorce that afternoon. My lawyer was brutal. We cited financial fraud and adultery. Because Morgan had attempted to defraud the marital estate, the infidelity clause in our prenup was triggered instantly. Her claim to alimony was voided. Her access to my assets was permanently revoked. She tried to call me, screaming and crying, blaming Idris, claiming she was manipulated. I didn't answer. I just forwarded the voicemails to my attorney. She was left with nothing but her clothes, a frozen debit card, and a boyfriend who was facing a federal investigation. A month later, the house was quiet. The kids were asleep upstairs, safe. I sat in my office and logged into the Oakhaven Trust. The balance shown on the screen, $2,500,000. It was back where it belonged. But I wasn't taking any more chances. I opened the security settings and selected Edit Protocols. I typed in a new requirement. Protocol update. Dual administrator signature required for all withdrawals. I assigned the second signature authority to my son. He wouldn't be able to use it until he was 21, but from this moment on, no money could leave this account without the approval of the next generation. Morgan had called my life boring. She called my planning suffocating. But as I looked at that secure balance, I realized she was wrong. Boring isn't bad. Boring is safe. Boring is secure. And I would never let anyone threaten my children's future with excitement ever again. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and went upstairs to check on my kids. They were sleeping soundly, completely unaware of how close they had come to losing everything. And thanks to me, they never would.